I sat there staring at my phone, frozen, barely breathing. For a moment I wondered if I had misunderstood what I heard. Maybe the voice belonged to someone passing by, or maybe Daniel was talking to a coworker. I tried to convince myself it meant nothing. But the line was still open. The woman laughed again, louder this time, like she felt completely comfortable around him. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice softer than the one he used with me. "You worry too much," he said. "Lauren trusts me. She always has." My fingers tightened around the phone. The woman replied, "Are you sure? 8 years is a long time. Women notice things eventually." Daniel chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "She won't," he said confidently. "I've handled everything. The late meetings, the trips, the excuses. She believes all of it." Each word felt like a crack spreading through the life I thought I knew. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. The woman's voice dropped slightly. "Still, you should tell her soon. You said you didn't want to keep hiding forever." There was a short pause before Daniel answered. "I will," he said. "But not yet. Things are easier this way." Easier. The word echoed in my mind. My husband was calmly discussing lies about me with another woman, like our marriage was nothing more than an inconvenience. Then the woman said something that made my chest tighten even more. "So when are you coming over tonight?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Give me 20 minutes, he replied. "I just needed to make that quick call home first." Home. My eyes filled with tears, but I forced myself not to make a sound. If he heard me, he would know the call never ended. Slowly, carefully, I pressed the button and ended it. The silence in the room felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. And for the first time in 8 years, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea who my husband really was. My hands were shaking after I ended the call. I placed the phone on the kitchen table and just stood there, trying to understand what had happened. A part of me wanted to believe it was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel had been joking. Maybe the woman was just a coworker. But deep down, I knew the truth was much worse. My heart was beating so fast it almost hurt. The words I heard kept repeating in my mind. Daniel sounded relaxed, comfortable, like this was something completely normal for him. That meant it wasn't new. I slowly sat down in the chair and stared at the wall. The house felt quiet, but my thoughts were loud. 8 years of marriage suddenly felt uncertain. I thought about all the nights he said he had late meetings. All the weekends when he said he needed to travel for work. At the time, none of it felt strange. Now every memory looked different. I realized something important in that moment. If Daniel was able to lie so easily, then confronting him right away would not help. He would simply deny everything. And I needed the truth. Not just a piece of it. I needed all of it. So I made a decision that surprised even me. I would act like nothing had happened. When Daniel came home later that night, I would smile like I always did. I would ask him about his day. I would pretend everything was normal. Meanwhile, I would watch carefully. I would notice where he went, what he said, and how he acted. Because if there was another woman in his life, there had to be signs. And if this relationship had been going on for as long as it sounded, the truth would eventually reveal itself. I wiped my face and stood up from the chair. Daniel thought I trusted him completely. For now, I would let him keep believing that. But from that moment on, I started paying attention to everything. And the more I thought about that woman's voice on the phone, the more one thing became clear. Someone out there believed my marriage was a joke. I was going to find out exactly who she was. The next few days felt strange. I moved through my normal routine, but inside I was watching everything Daniel did. At breakfast he talked about work like always. He kissed Emma on the head before leaving for the office. Nothing about his behavior looked different. If I didn't know what I had heard on that phone call, I would have believed everything was fine. But now I noticed small things. Sometimes his phone would buzz and he would quickly flip it over so the screen faced down. Other times he stepped into another room before answering a call. When I asked who it was, he simply said it was someone from work. One evening he told me he needed to travel for 2 days for a last-minute meeting. He packed quickly and left before dinner. I watched his car disappear down the street, wondering where he was really going. Later that night, I opened our shared bank account online. I wasn't looking for anything specific at first. I just wanted to see if something seemed unusual. That was when I noticed several charges from restaurants I had never been to. There were also payments for hotels in a nearby city. None of those dates matched the trips Daniel had told me about. The feeling in my chest grew heavier. A few days later I finally learned something important. Daniel mentioned that a marketing consultant had been helping his company with a big project. The name sounded familiar. Vanessa. The moment he said it, a memory came back to me clearly. Months ago, Daniel had invited me to a small company event. That night he introduced me to a woman named Vanessa Carter. She had long dark hair and a confident smile. She shook my hand warmly and told me Daniel talked about me all the time. Later she even complimented a dessert I had brought to the event. At the time I thought she seemed kind and friendly. Now I understood something painful. When she smiled at me that night, she already knew exactly who I was. And both of them had been lying straight to my face. After realizing what was happening, I knew I had 2 choices. I could confront Daniel right away and let my anger take control, or I could stay calm and think carefully about what to do next. I chose to stay quiet. Every day I acted the same as before. I cooked dinner, helped Emma with her homework, and talked to Daniel about normal things. From the outside, our life looked peaceful. But inside, I was paying attention to everything. I started writing things down in a small notebook that I kept hidden in my closet. Whenever Daniel said he had to work late, I wrote the date and the time he left the house. If he mentioned another trip or meeting, I added that too. I also began keeping receipts whenever I found them. Sometimes they were in his jacket pocket or his car. Small pieces of paper from restaurants, gas stations, and stores. Each one told a small part of a bigger story. At night, after everyone was asleep, I quietly checked our bank account again. I saved copies of anything that looked strange. I didn't fully understand what I might need later, but I wanted to be prepared. Meanwhile Daniel continued acting like nothing was wrong. He laughed with Emma in the living room, watched television with me in the evenings, and even talked about future plans like vacations and home repairs. Sometimes he held my hand while we sat together on the couch. Those moments hurt the most. Because now I knew those actions were just part of the life he was pretending to live. Still, I kept my emotions hidden. The more information I gathered, the clearer everything became. Daniel believed he was controlling the situation. He thought his secrets were safe. What he didn't know was that every lie he told was helping me build a clearer picture of the truth. And slowly, piece by piece, I began forming a plan. In my mind I started calling it something simple. My way out. And the moment when Daniel would finally face the consequences of everything he had done. One night after putting Emma to bed, I opened the laptop again and logged into our bank account. By then it had become part of my routine. I slowly checked through every transaction, trying to understand where our money was going. At first everything looked normal. Bills, groceries, gas, things that made sense for a family. But as I scrolled further back through the statements, something unusual caught my attention. There were several transfers I didn't recognize. They were not large enough to stand out immediately, but there were many of them. Small amounts moved out of our joint savings account every few weeks. I leaned closer to the screen and checked the details. The money was being transferred into another account. An account that was not listed under our shared finances. My stomach tightened as I looked at the numbers again. Over time, those small transfers had added up to a large amount. That money had been part of the savings we set aside for Emma's future. We had talked many times about how important it was to prepare for her college one day. I remembered the long conversations Daniel and I had about protecting that fund. We both promised we would never touch it unless it was truly necessary. But now I was staring at proof that the money was slowly disappearing. And Daniel had never mentioned it once. The realization felt heavier than the betrayal I already knew about. This wasn't just about another woman anymore. This was about our daughter. If Daniel was secretly moving money away from our shared account, it meant he was preparing for something. Maybe he was planning to leave, or maybe he thought he would need the money later. Either way, he was doing it without telling me. I sat there in the quiet room, looking at the screen, feeling a new kind of determination rise inside me. What started as a painful discovery about his affair had now become something much bigger. I wasn't just gathering the truth anymore. Now I was protecting my daughter and myself. And that meant I needed to be even more careful with every step I took. After discovering the missing money, I realized I could not handle everything alone. I needed someone who understood the legal side of things. But I also knew I had to be very careful about who I spoke to. At work, I casually mentioned to a coworker that I was dealing with some financial questions and might need legal advice. She quietly recommended a family attorney named Michael Reeves. She said he was professional and trustworthy. A few days later, while Daniel was at work and Emma was at school, I drove to a small office building across town. My hands felt cold as I walked inside. When I sat down in Michael's office, I felt nervous at first. Talking about my situation out loud made everything feel more real. But Michael listened patiently without interrupting. I showed him the documents I had collected. The bank statements, the records of money transfers, and the notes I had written about Daniel's trips and late nights. Michael reviewed everything carefully. He took his time looking at each page before speaking. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me seriously. He explained that moving money from a shared account without telling a spouse could create serious problems during a divorce. If Daniel continued transferring funds, it might become harder to recover the full amount later. Hearing that made my chest tighten. Michael then gave me simple advice. He told me not to confront Daniel yet. Acting too quickly could give Daniel time to hide more money or change his behavior. Instead, he suggested I stay calm and continue gathering information. The more clear evidence we had, the stronger my position would be. He also told me that timing would be very important. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. When I left his office that afternoon, I felt different than before. The situation was still painful, but now I had direction. I wasn't just reacting to Daniel's betrayal anymore. I was preparing for the moment when the truth would finally come out. And when that moment arrived, I wanted to make sure there was nowhere left for him to hide. A few weeks passed, and I continued living my routine carefully. Then one evening during dinner, Daniel mentioned he needed to attend another business conference over the weekend. He said it casually, like it was nothing unusual. I simply nodded and asked what city the meeting would be in. He gave a quick answer and continued eating like everything was normal. But I already knew the truth. Earlier that day, while reviewing more information, I had found something important. A reservation had been made at a resort not far from our city. The booking was under Vanessa's name, but the dates matched exactly with Daniel's so-called conference. Seeing that confirmation didn't shock me anymore. Instead, it made my decision clearer. When the weekend arrived, Daniel packed a small suitcase and told Emma he would bring her a souvenir from his trip. She hugged him goodbye at the door. I stood beside her and watched him walk to his car. He smiled at me before leaving, completely unaware of what was about to happen. After his car disappeared down the street, I closed the door and took a deep breath. The house felt unusually quiet. That morning I had already arranged another meeting with Michael. Later that day I sat across from him in his office again, placing a thick folder on his desk. Inside were all the documents I had collected over the past weeks. Bank statements, notes, receipts, and records of Daniel's trips. Michael reviewed everything carefully once more. Then he looked up and asked me a simple question. Are you ready to move forward? I thought about Emma, about the lies, and about the money that had been secretly taken. I nodded. That afternoon we completed the paperwork to officially file for divorce. Every piece of evidence I gathered was included. As I signed the final document, I realized something important. While Daniel believed he was enjoying a quiet weekend away, a completely different process had already begun. And he had no idea his entire world was about to change. Daniel returned home Sunday evening. I heard his car pull into the driveway while I was sitting at the kitchen table. Emma was in the living room watching a movie, and the house looked calm and normal. The front door opened and Daniel walked in carrying his suitcase. He looked relaxed, like he had just come back from an ordinary work trip. Hey, he said casually. Conference went longer than I expected. I looked at him for a moment and nodded. We need to talk. Something in my voice made him pause. He placed his suitcase near the wall and walked toward the kitchen table. What's going on? He asked. I stayed calm and motioned for him to sit down. The folder I prepared was already on the table in front of me. Once he sat down, I slid a few papers toward him. He looked at them with confusion at first. Then his expression slowly changed. The first page showed the transfers from our savings account. The next showed hotel reservations and travel bookings that matched the nights he claimed to be working late. Daniel looked up quickly. What is this? I folded my hands together and met his eyes. It's the truth, I said quietly. He shook his head immediately. Lauren, this isn't what it looks like. Without raising my voice, I placed another set of papers on the table. These included phone records and the dates I had carefully written down over the past weeks. His confidence started to disappear. I could see it in the way he stared at the documents, flipping through them faster and faster. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel looked nervous. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something else, but I spoke first. There's no reason to explain, I told him calmly. He looked at me again, confused. That was when I said the one thing he clearly wasn't expecting. The divorce has already been filed. For a moment Daniel didn't move at all. Then the color slowly drained from his face as he realized something important. Everything he tried to hide had already been uncovered. The weeks after the divorce filing were tense. Daniel hired a lawyer, hoping to challenge everything, but the evidence I had collected was too strong. Bank statements, receipts, travel records, and notes showing his lies left no room for doubt. In court, the judge looked at every piece of evidence carefully. I stayed calm, presenting everything in an organized way. Daniel's attempts to explain away his actions fell flat. The truth was clear, and the law saw it too. When the final ruling came, it was exactly what I had hoped for. I was granted full custody of Emma, and Daniel was ordered to repay the money he had secretly transferred from our joint account. The house remained mine, a safe place for us to rebuild our lives. It wasn't just the money or the house, it was the control he had tried to hold over us. For the first time in years, I felt free from his manipulation. Vanessa, the woman who had caused so much pain, quickly disappeared from Daniel's life. Word spread quietly within his company about the scandal, and her presence was no longer welcome. Daniel had miscalculated badly. The secret he thought he could keep had destroyed not only his marriage but his reputation as well. Daniel came to understand slowly, painfully, what he had lost. His confident smiles and casual lies were gone. The life he once had, the trust, the comfort, the family he took for granted, was no longer his. Meanwhile, Emma and I began to settle into a new routine. Evenings were quieter but filled with laughter and warmth. We started small traditions, like weekend pancakes and story time, things Daniel had ignored in his obsession with his secret life. I realized that the betrayal I had endured had taught me more about strength than I ever imagined. Daniel had believed he could manipulate everything and everyone around him, but in the end, the truth and careful planning had undone him completely. Sitting on the porch one evening with Emma, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We were safe, secure, and together. Daniel had lost everything, but in that loss, I had gained the life I deserved, and a chance to truly move forward. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again. The house, once full of tension and secrets, now felt calm. Emma laughed more often, and our evenings were filled with quiet routines that brought comfort instead of stress. I focused on rebuilding my own life, little by little. I took long walks in the mornings, started reading books I had ignored for years, and even joined a small local class to meet new people. These small steps reminded me that I could take care of myself and make decisions for my own happiness. Raising Emma became my central focus. I made sure she knew she was safe and loved, that she didn't have to carry the weight of Daniel's mistakes. Watching her grow, seeing her smile without worry, gave me strength I hadn't realized I still had. I began to trust my instincts again. The betrayal had taught me to notice the small signs, to be cautious but not fearful. Every decision I made now felt intentional, not dictated by someone else's lies or manipulation. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and Emma was asleep, my mind wandered back to that night, the night Daniel forgot to end the call. I remembered the laughter of the other woman, the casual way he spoke, and the shock that had pierced through me. It amazed me how one small mistake could change everything. That single moment of carelessness had revealed the truth that months of suspicion and quiet observation had confirmed. Without it, I might have never discovered the full extent of his betrayal. Thinking back on it now, I no longer felt anger every time I remembered. I felt clarity. That call had been the turning point that gave me the chance to reclaim my life. I had lost trust, yes, and I had been hurt deeply. But from that pain, I gained something greater: awareness, strength, and the courage to start over. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And every day, as I watched Emma play or helped her with homework, I felt proud of how far we had come. The past could not hold us back anymore. We were free, and I was stronger than I had ever been.